The guest on today's episode is someone who I have actually followed on social media for a long time. She is another fellow CPG, consumer packaged goods founder. She's the founder of Behave Candy. Maybe you've seen it on the shelves of your local Whole Foods. Maybe you've purchased it before. It is a low sugar candy. And I love following other founders. But why I've loved following Mayssa is she talks so much about manifestation, mindset, and she really started sharing her journey on TikTok when she was experiencing rock bottom. She recently shared her story a little bit more in depth on social, and I reached out to her and I said, I would love for you to come on our podcast and for you to share this with our community. I think whether it is entrepreneurial or emotional, family related, health related, all of these things, a lot of us can relate to and have experienced rock bottom ourselves. And it's really inspiring to hear how someone has dug their way back out of that rock bottom. So today we dive in to that with Mayssa, and I think you're going to really, really enjoy this episode. I can't wait to hear your reactions and responses. Please come and tell us what you think on social, drop us a review, and let's dive in. This is such a good episode. Welcome back, Flow State Podcast listeners. We are so excited for today's episode. We have Mayssa Chehata, who is the founder of Behave Candy. Maybe you have tried it before. I know that I love getting my fingers on this candy. The sour is so amazing. But today we're not even going to really dive into entrepreneurship except through a lens of self-growth, which I think if you have been an entrepreneur, you will quickly realize that it really is just a self-growth journey. But thank you so much for being here with us today, Mayssa.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
I would love for you to just provide a brief introduction. I think about maybe like where you would say this journey with manifestation, if you would call it that, started for you, and what maybe the quote unquote bottom has felt like, because I know that your journey has been kind of coming out of this rock bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I was someone who had no real spiritual connection or belief system. Basically my whole life, my family was not religious, and I just sort of, felt like I was this very practical. My dad was like an engineer scientist, so we kind of grew up with that, be realistic type of mindset. And then I kind of started getting this pull to want to start something, maybe start a business. I had some ideas that were floating around, and I picked up that book, which I think is a lot of people's first entry point into manifestation, which was, You Are a Badass. And it's that yellow book. Like, I remember I used to see it at like Urban Outfitter. I feel like it was everywhere for a time. And that was really my first entry point. And I think, that was just sort of opened my mind. And I was like, I had this business idea at the time. I didn't really know how I was going to make it happen. So it kind of gave me that first push of like, start to trust the universe, like believe that there's something bigger than you that can help to guide you. I didn't fully grasp or totally even believe it at the time. I was still very skeptical, but obviously it was very convenient to be like, if I just put things on a vision board, they're going to come true. I think in my journey, that was 6 or 7 years ago, in my journey since then, and what I've been through and getting deeper with manifestation and neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain and all that kind of stuff. I think I understand a little more how it really works. But it was really at least that first kind of touch point that was like really easily digestible. What I will say is I think what I took away from some of that initial stuff, and I think when you're first getting into manifestation, what really hooks you is this idea that just write the Jim Carrey, write a check for $10 million and then you'll wake up, in 5 minutes and you'll have $10 million in your bank account. You'll have a $10 million movie deal. So great. We'll sign all of us up for that. What I think I then learned is that over time and in the process of actually then like getting the courage to leave my job, start the business, is it doesn't really work like that. To be completely transparent, like I don't still fully understand how it works, but I ultimately then found a practice called To Be Magnetic, which, and I think that the way that they approach manifestation, whether, you know, that program interests you or not, I think the foundation of how they talk about manifestation is what I have now really understood to be like a truth, at least in my life, which is that you don't manifest from your conscious beliefs. So you can consciously think, I want $1 million or I can have $1 million. But if somewhere in your subconscious, you believe that I would never be a person who will have $1 million in my bank account, you will never be able to manifest that. Or almost worse, you might manifest it through some series of, you know, fortunate events or some, you know, the power of our beliefs are very strong. So you may actually create it from your conscious belief. You will lose all of it when your subconscious takes hold of the ship again, when your dysregulated nervous system comes back online. And I can share that was really my experience because I had this huge like vacuum of energy when I left my job and started my business, and I raised, you know, close to 7 figures of capital from investors. Looking back, I don't know how I did it because I had very low self-worth. I did not believe I was going to be able to run this business on a deep subconscious level. But at the conscious level, I was like, okay, we're going to power through. We're going to do this. And I raised that money and it immediately unleashed like a Pandora's box of chaos into my life because my wounded inner child, all, you know, everything that I had kind of experienced from childhood up until getting this business off the ground came, you know, rushing up to the surface, all the emotions I had buried literally since I was a child, growing up in sort of a chaotic house and you know, one of the only women or girls of color in a very white community. Like there was all this stuff that I'm not good enough, that I don't get anything, that I don't get the boy, I don't get the money, I don't get the success. So that all came rushing up to the surface. And those first 2-3 years were literally fight or flight. Like my nervous system was highly activated. And that is what landed me ultimately in a rock bottom going into basically the 3rd year of my business. I'm in hindsight shocked we even made it to 3 years. That is truly a testament to a stroke of luck and why I now have a very strong belief system in a higher power, which was meeting my co-founder. She was sent to me from something beyond myself because the only reason we made it to 3 years, the only reason we've even made it to where we are now is that I did something really good in a past life and I was sent this incredible person to be my partner in this journey for this business in my co-founder, Emily. And so anyways, if it was just me, I don't think we would have even made it to that 3-year point. And I hit this rock bottom emotionally. I mean, there was so much going on. We can get into it with the business, nothing going right, banging our heads against the wall, sort of one catastrophe and fire drill after another. And then, you know, the good thing with a rock bottom is like, now I'll try anything. So it was really in that rock bottom where I was like, you know, you hear it all the time, God, universe, something like, is something going to come and help me? And I basically became so dedicated to doing whatever work, whatever modality, whatever anything could help shift my reality into something different. And, you know, I had been so attached to my reality needing to be not just a successful business, this business being successful. When you hit the rock bottom, I think there's also an inherent detachment, which is actually, I just need to be okay because I'm not okay right now. And then you detach because from there, I was like, if I have to shut down the business, I will, because I can't live like this. And sorry, this is a very long-winded answer, but ultimately it was in the rock bottom where I dedicated myself to the To Be Magnetic program. I was already, you know, I'd been in therapy for years at that point, but you know, and I think a lot of us do this. We go to therapy and we're like, you know, we're intellectualizing our feelings and we're kind of like, you know, we're basically using therapy as another place to like people please and get validation from our therapist, which is what I was doing. But then that rock bottom was like, no, we need to go like excavate this subconscious muck. that's been buried, and that the TB magnetic work, and we can talk more in detail about it, but it's really about like going back into childhood memories, reprogramming, reparenting your inner child. And so did that work. It's very hard. It's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable, and there, there is fear. And people ask me all the time, like, even people talk about it with mushrooms too. Like, aren't you afraid to take mushrooms and see what comes up? But I think being in a rock bottom, and also just, I've kind of always been like this. It's like, I'd rather see it than have it operating me from within, where I don't even know what it is. My life just feels like chaos. So went in and did that work, was really dedicated to it. I was doing TBM like every day because I couldn't even leave my house. I could barely get out of bed in this time period. So that is, I feel like once I started that work, which was beginning of 2023, I was really dedicated. I basically did all the programs in a 6-month period. That was a big shift. And then, that we can get into like other stuff that I've been doing, but like a lot of nervous system regulation since then. And I truly feel like the other side of the rock bottom is now like a new reality. So, that's sort of been my journey with like how I first got exposed to manifestation through that book, and, maybe some of the misconceptions I had about it. And then ultimately having kind of no choice but to go and do the deeper work. And now I feel like I'm manifesting and I'm creating a new reality, and I'm seeing the world around me feels and looks so different in a way that I don't think I would have been able to get to if I hadn't kind of like descended first.
I want to take a step back and kind of understand what you were feeling or what your state was. You mentioned chaos, you mentioned not being able to get out of bed, but like in that rock bottom, did you notice symptoms in your body, or what was it that you were feeling in those moments?
Yeah, the fatigue was really extreme. And then the spiraling thoughts. That was the other thing. It's like, I actually would get very little done in a day. I was kind of like getting the bare minimum done to just like not have the business completely collapse. Like, I would answer those few emails that needed to be answered. I would take those few phone calls that needed to be taken. But my whole energetic capacity was very small. And those couple of tasks that I would get done would drain me. And then I was like, obviously I can't get my business to move forward because I don't have the energy to like be creative or come up with, I'm just like fighting fires. I don't have the energy to like come up with a forward momentum answer or a project or, solution. So that's where I feel like I was kind of stuck in this like energetic debt. And then the other thing I noticed as I would get sick, and my getting sick it's really interesting. And I want to be mindful. Like, I don't want to come off as, there's a really gray area and fine line here between like connection with, spiritual connection to illness and like, being a science denier, which I am not, and so I want to be mindful, just to preface with that. But for me in my life in that period, there was such a direct correlation between when I was getting sick and what was happening for me emotionally. Like, I would, one of my favorite distractions during this time was find a guy to date, right? And it would always be a really chaotic, misaligned situation because my nervous system really only knew chaos. So I would like get into some kind of chaotic dating situation. It would be directly correlated to a time that I was trying to avoid facing my emotions and facing the reality of what was happening in my business or in my life. I had some family stuff going on at the time. I was going through a divorce at the time. So didn't want to really face and sit with my feelings. So I would go date someone. And then like right as that would end, I would get like very sick. Like I would basically have like 1 or 2 days where I truly couldn't get out of bed. Not just like, there's not get out of bed because you just feel like shitty and depressed. But this was like, my body will not, like, I can barely walk to like get to the doctor's office right now. Very, very sick for 24 to 48 hours. And then I feel like once I finally just laid in bed and, a lot of time would find myself crying, releasing emotion, then I would feel better immediately. So it's like, it didn't even track as like a flu or a bacteria or something that you'd kind of have this like rebound, like a longer rebound period. It would be like, as soon as I cried, I would be like at 100% the next day. And I'd like go take a SoulCycle class. So like I feel like it was very emotional the way I was getting sick around that time as well. So I noticed that for sure. I mean, a lot of the other usual stuff, right? Like my skin, I feel like was being very reactive in accordance to like what was going on emotionally. And then my, it's almost like I would have these like physical symptoms or these physical like roller coasters that were connected to the food that I was eating, but the food I was eating was connected to my emotional state. I'm a classic sugar addict. That's why I started a candy company and we make low sugar candy because I need to feed my own addiction, but not eat as much sugar. But, I would go when I wanted to suppress my emotions. I used to drink and go out and party. I stopped drinking a couple years ago. So, but then I would still lean on the sugar. And so, sugar binges, like I feel like my friends who know me are like, no, you would not believe how Mayssa eats sugar. Like, I feel like people who don't know me that well wouldn't believe it. But I could do like a full bag of Tate's cookies, a bag of Sour Patch Kids, a pack of Twizzlers and ice cream and like 3 slices of pizza. And it was like, obviously it was all emotional. It was all suppression. It was like, there's something trying to come up, an emotion, a trauma, something, and I need to push it down. So I would do it with the food and then I would have the repercussions of eating like that. The body, mind, soul connection is so intertwined. And just to kind of like close the loop on that, as I started feeling better, I was able to take more of a hold on how I was eating. I had no control over what I was eating before. It was completely mindless. I was eating from complete unconsciousness. I couldn't even I would, when it's classic, like eating way after I'm full kind of thing, like, grew up with like finish your whole plate kind of mentality. So as I started feeling better and finding more consciousness and presence and just even like meditating. So then when I would eat, I feel like I had more presence with what I was doing. Then then obviously I started feeling better and then I could manifest more because I was in a better state physically. And then last year I got really dedicated to detoxing from sugar. So I did like a couple of extended periods of like full sugar detox, including fruit. Had so many benefits. I mean, physical are the obvious ones, but so many mental benefits and I would say spiritual benefits as well. And then I also just had this interesting realization, which was I was building this business built around sugar. We really try not to demonize sugar, but at the same time, we do, I think as a society, need to face what sugar is doing to our bodies and and the role sugar plays in the food system, particularly in America, how it's added to everything, how it has this addictive quality. The companies that make our food know that it has an addictive quality. That's why it's in the bread, So, how can I be building a business that's telling people, the sugar in our food really is killing us. We don't say that because we don't want to be in this villainous conversation around food, but that is the subtext of why we think the candy industry needs to be disrupted in this way. And we need to find ways to offer people treats and indulgence without the amount of sugar and artificial ingredients that they normally have. How could that be the ethos of my business? But I'm stopping at the bodega when I'm sad and buying like the worst products and putting that into my body. So there was also this like spiritual connection between the food I was eating. And then I think if I could even make this business be successful because I wasn't really living the ethos of my own message and the mission of my business.
Yeah. I hear that theme of like disconnect a little bit in that story. And I'm curious to learn more of like, I presume even doing the program that you participated in was an investment, both energetic, financial. I'm guessing when you're in your rock bottom, how do you tell yourself like, this is worth it? Like, this is, I need the impetus or a catalyst to like turn the ship around. But even like taking that initiative or first step to dig out of the hole, I'm really curious how you even like thought, okay, I'm worth investing in this state right now.
And it's such a good question because I think that is that is the paradox of the rock bottom, is you're so depleted. You have no energy. You literally feel like nothing can go your way. And you've been banging your head against the wall for months, years, decades. And you're like, I remember literally posing this question to probably my therapist at the time of like, I don't even have the energy to get out of bed. How am I going to have the energy to like have success and like be abundant? Like I can't even like, so it feels so far away. So I think sometimes that's where like the real, like kind of destitute, like wanting to give up energy comes. But the other kind of weird beauty of the rock bottom is that you're kind of willing to try anything. Right. And I think, around the time that I started that program, I stopped paying myself a salary from my business. So I was also now moving into a space where I was living off of a credit card and, like had run through all my savings, was basically experiencing financial insecurity for the first time. I'd been in stable corporate jobs up until I started my company. So all of this was, on my mind for sure. But first off, the To Be Magnetic program I want to share, it is $30 a month. So it is extremely affordable. It is, I know, truly, it's like a blessing. I mean, Lacey Phillips and her team, I like they're angels or something, because it's so like, you do have to commit, I think, to 12 months, but it's still like the whole all-in cost was $250, and there was a time. Here's the thing about the rock bottom. When you're on the descent to the rock bottom, there were moments on the way down where I was like, $250, I don't know, because it's not that bad yet. So you're like, yeah, I'm like, I'm partying every weekend and I feel like shit and things are not going my way, but like, it's fine. I mean, I still get out of bed. I still go on dates. When you are in your apartment in the middle of December in New York, you literally can't get out. You have like 20 unread text messages from friends asking, are you alive? Are you okay? $250, you're going to hit purchase on $250. Like that suddenly felt like nothing. And I get this question a lot, actually, and I just want to answer your question, Nora, because the To Be Magnetic program for me is such a no-brainer, especially considering the cost. But I get questions a lot of like around that time, I also started working with a spiritual teacher. She is much more extensive. She's a couple $100s per session. In the beginning, I couldn't afford her. So I was like, maybe we'll start once a month. But once I did one session, I was like, I need to see you daily. Actually, we netted out on once a week. But it was a huge investment. It was probably the thing I was spending the most money on after my rent. And I was living on a credit card. So I was literally living off of debt at this time. But again, it's like, I think I just had this knowing that if I don't do this work now, I'm stuck here. Like I'm going to be in this reality until something really drastic changes, and it has to be an interchange. It's not going to be, because the other thing that I don't know if I understood it at the time, but I understand it now. Actually, if something had come around at that time and fixed my business, let's say in that when I was like feeling really shitty, someone had come and invested $5 million in my company, or, Walmart called us and placed an order for $5 million. It could have happened, right? I do think you can, like I said, I think you can manifest from that conscious level. It would have all fallen apart. And it would have been, and I'm actually grateful sometimes that my business couldn't take off until I did this inner work, because now I have a solid foundation. And I think that's why I knew I'm spending so much money on this spiritual coaching right now, but it is going to be a foundation for everything that I do from here forward. And if I don't build this stronger foundation, everything I do is going to the rug is going to keep getting pulled out from under me, because that's my inner state is that, and my inner belief system is the rug, the other shoe always drops. The rug always gets pulled out. So even if $5 million had shown up the next day, my nervous system would have been responding to that from, well, I'm just now waiting for this to fall apart. And then I would have self-sabotaged until it fell apart, and my nervous system would, and fall apart or not, I would have felt terrified, which is kind of what happened to me when I raised that initial funding. So, I think that's where, when you're kind of like, do I invest in this? And I always preface with this is not financial advice, you know, and I'm a Sagittarius, so I'm learning more about astrology. I think this might be a pattern for Sagittarius as well, is like rock bottom hard, rebound quickly. But, you know, through the work I did with that spiritual coach, I feel like there has been so much nervous system regulation. There has been such a shift in just my belief system around what's possible for me, how I can show up in the world, and what the world can reflect back to me, that I paid off more than half of my debt in like an overnight sort of weird situation that played itself out because she kind of kept me calm as I was approaching like that real limit with my credit cards and maybe not even being able to continue any further. And then I just feel like since then, like more and more crazy stuff keeps happening. And I think it really is the result of a lot of the work that I've kind of done and invested in. So it seems like a lot of money, but, you know, hopefully when I look back on this whole journey and, you know, it's not about the money, but there's $100 million in my bank account. Those 15,000 or 30,000 on the spiritual coach is going to be a footnote in this story.
I'm curious, you know, I'm hearing you talk about manifesting from a conscious state and how like that's almost like dangerous because your nervous system isn't ready for it yet, right? So you did the TBM program, you worked with your spiritual coach. What did it look like? And what do you think that process was to regulate the nervous system? How long did it take? And now how are you manifesting from a, I guess, unconscious state or a deeper level? Like what was that process and timeline?
Yeah. And it's all about the subconscious with TBM. So it's like, how do you start manifesting from true self-worth and confidence and trust from a subconscious level versus I consciously want $1 million. Fine. Maybe the universe will bring it to you, but I subconsciously don't believe I can hold $1 million or I deserve $1 million. So that's where the breakdown ends up happening in the long run. So, you know, I feel like nervous system regulation is the buzzword of the day right now. But, and I want to also caveat this with, I use these words sometimes because it's the words that like my teachers use, or even just the content I consume. I am not like deeply educated on these subjects, but from my own experience, I have an understanding of what has happened to me as my nervous system becoming more regulated. Like that's what it feels like to me. Not that I'm not educated enough to even be able to fully like conceptualize what a nervous system really is, but I have some understanding of like how mine was operating my body and my life previously and how it feels different now. So, just a little disclaimer of, you know, pardon any kind of misuse of terms or things like that. But, you know, what I think it felt like for me was that initial TBM work was these deep meditations where you basically draw up a childhood memory that is connected to some trauma. And usually it's connected to a story, right? And the reality is there's not that many stories, right? Like we're all pretty much like one consciousness that's just playing itself out in different story plot lines. It's usually I don't get love. It's usually I don't get what I want. It's usually I have to work hard to get love, or I have to do everything for myself. It's like a couple of things. So drawing up those memories where that story got reinforced for you at some point in childhood, right? You got reprimanded by a teacher for, you know, for whatever. You got, you know, yelled at by your parent. You were hurt and you needed comfort and you didn't get it. So you draw up the memories. And I think what has happened to a lot of us is that as these events are playing out in our early life, especially in our early childhood, we don't have any tools or any systems to understand them. And we are socialized to don't cry. I mean, talk about the don't cry message that men get if we want to talk about like some of the differences in socialization between men and women. I think we're in this gender war now where we're so quick to want to demonize men. Like imagine like even the girls, we were told not to cry. Just imagine the boys, you know? So, but anyways, I think all of us across the board were told to behave, to be quiet, to keep still, to stay in line, to do your schoolwork, to do your homework when we wanted to go outside and play. So we just have suppressed so much, and then it's all stored in our body, right? And that's where like the nervous system dysregulation comes from. So the 2B magnetic meditations, I think, do a really good job of like, go back to that time in your mind when you wanted to like cry or rage or maybe punch your parent in the face because they were being a fucking asshole. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse, but go back and play that memory out and kind of give that child who had to store that negative emotion in the body, and it's probably still stuck there, right? You hear the body keeps the score, and play out a new outcome for that. And that's the reparenting. So it's like, the way the meditations work, it's like you show up as now your adult self, or as she calls it, a magnetic parent. So a parent who would have known what to do in that situation. Comfort the child, let the child rage, play with the child, like redirect their attention to, let's draw, let's make art, like something, and you play this all out in your mind. And I think what it does is you just kind of like go back to the scene of the crime, and then you kind of you create this different outcome just in your own mind. And that, I can only speak to my experience, like truly just created so much calm over time through repetition. And it's like you keep uncovering these new memories. I'm one of those people who had almost no childhood memory going into this program.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, how do you remember? Because like when I try to think back to my childhood, I'm like, oh, what? Oh,
girl, I don't even remember college. Like I'm one of those people who really has no memory. And again, because I think now that I understand more, like I had a lot of anxiety as a child. I was in fight or flight from such a young age. So I don't even think I was really processing what was happening around me because I was so activated all the time. But, through these, what I say too is through the meditations, for one, I think I've unlocked a lot of memory. And like, again, I know that can sound scary to people, and people are like, what if I unlock a suppressed memory? And it's this like terrifying thing. But I think you have to understand that like, if there's something deep in your subconscious, it's ruling you either way. And you actually free yourself by bringing it up into the consciousness, and then you release it effectively. Also, for most of us, hopefully, I know there's a privilege in being able to say this, but for most of us, anything that will come up is something you can handle.
That's what I was going to say, like needing the tools to like deal with, and hopefully, like you said, we can do so now where we didn't have those skills or understanding from even an emotional standpoint as a child.
Exactly. So that was a big piece of it. Like I said, the 2B Magnetic program was a really big part of how I kind of got the ball rolling here. Then there was the work with the spiritual coach, and also in tandem with the therapy, which I've had done for years and I continue to do now. I think, it has its place among all of this. And then the other thing that I really just speak so highly of is breath work. So then I started doing breath work like pretty shortly after starting that TBM work. Excuse me. And that I think was another space, like, so in the TBM meditations, there's a lot of release, right? Like you're going back into the old memories, you're uncovering like the sadness that was there or the anger that was there. As women, there's going to be a lot of anger there. So like I said, the men were told not to cry. There's a lot of stored sadness. As women, we are told like prim, proper, feminine, so no anger. So much anger has come out for me. Yes. So much anger. We have to find healthy outlets. We have to rage. And in breathwork, the breathwork teacher that I work with and the practices that I've been able to take and experiences I've been able to take part in, every class has what he calls a sacred scream. And so screaming at the top of your lungs, usually on this other side of that, there is tears and grief, probably at the fact that has been stored. So the breath work, the first 3 months of breath work, I sobbed crying and I raged through the whole hour session. Now emotions still come. There's always emotion. We're all suppressing emotions every single day. It's just part of living in modern society. And so emotions come up, but I just really believe in breath work as a practice because I got so much out in the initial where now it's like a walk in the park. So, and I feel like that speaks to the fact, and it's the same with the TBM work, that there's a backlog of stored emotions and stuck emotions. And if you clear them, you do get to the other side. I think there's a lot of fear with some of this work of, I'm going to go open a Pandora's box by going into a breathwork session. And then I'm going to be stuck in the chaos of that and in processing that for the rest of my life. I probably processed like 30 years of stuck emotion in really the first 6 months of TBM and then the first like 3 months of breath work. And then I feel like I shifted into this new state and this new reality where there's still so much more work to be done and there will always be healing, but it's like that was the major shift and where like, I feel like I live in a different reality now. So it's not this like 10-year long process and, let me also say, maybe it is 10 years and, it also depends. Like I'm very fortunate because I'm single. I live alone. I don't have children. So I was able to go really, really heads down and I'm self-employed. So I was able to go really deep and make my own schedule with this. So let me also maybe have mindfulness that everyone is different and just however often you can do this stuff, I think is the pace that you'll be able to process and move through some of that stuck the gunk in the subconscious. But I think sometimes people are afraid to start because again, the fear of what's down there and then the fear of how long I'm going to be cleaning. But it's like, if you have a dirty room, you just need to start cleaning it. Like just go to one corner, clean out that corner. And the next thing you know, the whole room is like sparkling clean.
Had you come into contact with these like healing modalities previously and had kind of like a stop-go relationship with them or, not been able to be consistent?
So I had no exposure to any of these healing modalities prior to around that time when I left to start my business. I think it's exactly what they say. Like you will only see things that your mind has some awareness of. So I was not seeking any spiritual connection, any healing work. I went into therapy because, unfortunately one of my parents struggles with addiction. So that, was starting to kind of bubble up. So I started seeing a therapist around that time. And I was so unconscious. I didn't even realize that my parent was struggling with an addiction. And it took about 6 months in therapy to even recognize and acknowledge that, just to speak to like how unconscious and unaware I was of my own reality. Then I got married and divorced 6 months later. So again, like I was not connecting with like what was really happening right in front of me. But again, it's like those things started bubbling up. And then I think I kind of started opening my mind to like, I do need help. I'm not okay. This is too much for me. And then that's when my mind and my heart became open and then things started entering my orbit. So actually I like right around that time, a friend mentioned the TBM to be magnetic. And I remember looking it up, but like didn't really go for it. Then right, like a month after I sort of had made the decision to get divorced, and this was right as COVID, we were locked down. I did mushrooms for the first time. I think mushrooms is like a fast track to getting onto this kind of path and becoming more open to these modalities, because you just see and hear and experience so much. And then, from there, I would say there was the start and stops. Like then I actually signed up to be magnetic a year before I actually committed to it. And I think I did like 1 or 2 days or sessions and then I stopped. And my thing with all of this is just, I feel like these things find you. People say like the mushrooms will call you or the ayahuasca will call you. Like I really believe that now. I think, people ask me all the time, how do you find a spiritual teacher? Like and I'm so grateful and I work with such an incredible teacher. Like in a way she found me. I was open. Like I knew I needed help. And, I was talking to a friend who works with her and she's like, you should talk to this woman. And so, it's just, I think once you open yourself up, the things that are meant for you will find you. The money will kind of work it. Like, again, not financial advice, but I do believe like the money even starts to work itself out. And you have to try. And also sometimes you're not ready. Like, Eckhart Tolle says this a lot. I'm kind of obsessed with Eckhart Tolle as a spiritual teacher. if you pick up my book and you can't read it, it's okay. You're not ready. Just put it down and come back to it. And that was me. I picked up, A New Earth 3 or 4 times. Literally, it was gibberish on the page to me. And then when I started working with my spiritual teacher, she has everyone read it as part of your kind of initiation into working with her. And at the time I was ready to work with her, which I also don't think I would have been a year or 2 sooner. And then I was ready to read the book, and I read it cover to cover in like a few weeks and blew my mind, and like also a huge like shift in my mindset and my perspective. So just like, but then not feeling ashamed or feeling like, I don't say not ready even as a negative thing. It's just like the timing's not right. So you can always put the thing down. Even with To Be Magnetic, it changed my whole life. And I had put it down once or twice before I actually went and got into it. And that's where the rock bottom also comes in. You know what? Sometimes you need to bottom out before you're really going to be ready to take the step. I say this to people with dating all the time. Like, I'm a big believer. If my friend comes to me and is like, I texted my ex, I'm like, okay, we're going back into the rabbit hole. That's okay. Like, no, if you knew my personality, you would think that I'd be the one that's like, no, like, fuck your ex. Like, no, we're not going back. And I do believe in, we don't go backwards, we go forwards, but you will go forward when you're ready to go forward. So if you even want to text your ex, and that's an analogy for everything, you need to touch that fire one more time. Eventually you'll be burned enough that this fire is no longer interesting to you. That's kind of, I think, the rock bottom. And then you kind of become ready to like start really moving forward.
Yeah. I really like the emphasis around this being a practice and like a journey, because I think where we started the conversation today of like, yeah, right, the $10 million check, like, of course everybody wants this thing, but it's a commitment and it's a practice. It's not just like going to magically happen because you write these things down. And everyone has the potential to do this. I think like everyone has their own story. I've even like being on the precipice of becoming a parent has been really, really interesting, and just learning more about my own parents, how they were parented, why I am the way I am. And now I'll get to reinvent or change how my partner and I parent. I'm really excited about that. And it also feels like a lot of pressure in the same sense. But I think like just acknowledging every single person, no matter if you've had a good upbringing or a bad upbringing or XYZ, like we all have stuff.
Yeah.
And processing that differently or over different timelines, but that we're all capable of doing that work, but it is work.
Yeah. As you were talking, what came to mind, Nora, was if you ask the universe for $10 million, you will get the $10 million, but you will first get every single thing that is why you don't currently have $10 million. If you were aligned with $10 million, you'd have it now. So if you have $5 now, you are going to have to move through all of the reasons why you have $5 now. And 10 million is available to absolutely everyone on earth. But if the disconnect is from 5 to 10 million, we're going to have to figure out why, and we are going to have to move through it. Did you have abusive parents? Did you have parents that told you weren't worth anything? Did you grow up in poverty? Did your family have a ton of money and lose it all? Did your parents divorce because of money? So in your mind, money is this thing that breaks up families. So you don't even your subconscious doesn't even want to get money because you think it's going to make everything fall apart. So why don't you have the 10 million now? When you have 5 and you say you want 10 million, be ready for everything to come up. And then that's actually, and it's like, and then, what I now find like that I almost laugh at is, when you go through all that stuff, you realize like the 10 million doesn't even matter. I just actually needed to heal all these things. I only even wanted 10 million because like I thought my parents didn't love me or something. And, and then you go through all of this and then you like find this, spiritual connection, or you do this healing, and then you're kind of like, I'm actually good with just like, obviously everyone needs some baseline of, to survive and to have like a stable life. But if you're there, you're kind of fine. And then once you realize that, then 10 million actually comes like this in a snap of a finger, because you're not attached to it and you've done the healing and you're no longer attached to the stories of why your subconscious is kind of sabotaging you not to have it.
I'm having so many moments in this conversation of just being like, there's my problem. So thank you. But I got divorced 2 years ago, and I feel very similarly to you in that I was living in a very unconscious state through that, and just like moving through the next things in my life and kind of like checking the boxes and doing the things, but not really following any kind of personal values. And I similarly, probably 3 years ago, signed up for TBM and like never did anything. And halfway through, like, I'm going to say this and it's embarrassing, but like wanted my money back, but you commit to a year. And I remember being really angry that I couldn't get my money back. And I actually recently, after listening to your story, re-signed up for TBM. And I'm like, so interesting that like I can see now in my past, just like the unconscious state that I was in and the anger that was like in me. So it's super interesting. And I'm hoping that anyone listening might be kind of like picking up some pieces of themselves through your story as well. I'm really curious to hear what the work looks like for you today, because like this work never stops, right? Even though you're kind of feeling like you're coming out the other side and you're receiving and you've done some soothing and uncovering, like, what does it look like to continue on this journey? Because it doesn't end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, I think it's almost like when you start feeling better is kind of like the hardest point, right? Because now I've been feeling so much better. You know, I talked about having so little energy, could barely even get like an email out. Now I am like full of life force. I have like 3 creative projects going. I have a 4th that I want to kick off soon. My business is doing well. I wake up every day energized, and it's like, oh, I don't need to meditate. Let me just hop on. I want to go. Let me get my walk in. I have the energy to work out again. I didn't have that before. Like, I want to get my workout. So, that's actually when you have to be like, no, I don't want to put a fear on it. I actually believe you don't end up back in your rock bottom. Like we'll continue to bottom out in different ways. But the way I kind of think about it, if I had a graphic, is like, there's a rock bottom that every time you rock bottom, your next rock bottom is higher. If like, you know, if you were to think of it as like a graph. So, and I think that also hopefully can help people. Like if you're in a really low point, I used to think like, what if I end up back here or worse? What I have found, if you actually do the healing work and you process, is that you won't go back down that far. You'll kind of like, you know, there are still going to be lows. It's life. Things are going to happen to us, but you have more tools and your nervous system is more regulated. So I think one is not falling into that complacency where even in the last 2 weeks, I've been like, oh, I'd rather get a run in than, or a workout in than do my meditation. But making sure you hold on to the tools that kind of got you here, I think is really important. So for me, that's like continuing with, you know, my spiritual coach, continuing with therapy. The breath work for me is really important. It's been really easy to be like, oh, do I want to get to, the class I usually take is 9 a.m. on a Sunday. So I really want to get to my 9 a.m. But every time I go, I am so grateful. So like just maintaining those practices that got you here. And the other one I'll mention, just because it's like showing up for me right now, is I've been feeling really, really great. And then last weekend I had an ex show up, and then I had, a situation with each of my parents separately. And, I was talking to my therapist about this yesterday, and it's like, I think everyone has experienced this. It's like the second people say it in dating all the time, the second you're feeling better, the second you're getting over them, they call you or they text you. Your ex.
Test, yeah.
A little test. Exactly. And, what I think is also really important to talk about is, and this is kind of how I was talking to my therapist about it yesterday, and where we kind of landed is, this is going to sound kind of intense, but I just want to speak candidly, is like my biggest the little girl inside of me, all she ever wanted was love from those people, from the person that you tried to date, that you tried to get to love you, from your parents that maybe you wanted to love you in a certain way and they weren't able to show up in that specific way. So as you're up leveling, feeling better, vibrating higher, you have changed, but they have not. That's what my therapist said to me yesterday. And that's what I think is really hard, because sorry, I'm regurgitating something I posted on TikTok yesterday, but I'm just going to say it because I loved the message. There's a graveyard of people from your past that you desperately wanted to love you, or you wanted validation from them, or you wanted to prove something to them. As you're going to start up leveling, there is going to be such an urge to kind of go back and dig up those graves and be like, what about now? Now my business is going well. Now I feel beautiful. Now I, have money. Now I have self-worth. Can you love me now? Can you love me how I wanted you to love me now? And it's actually, you have to be mindful not to do that, because the whole point of this journey is that now I get the love from within me. And then for me personally, I also have now a connection with a higher power. So I get love from me and from my higher power now. If I go back, that's my old pattern, is asking the guy I was dating to give me that love and that sense of security and safety, to ask my mother or my father to give me that love and that sense of security and safety. We're not doing that pattern anymore, but the urge to play that pattern out it is literally so visceral, because we are biologically wired to truly, survival as a child and as a baby is dependent on receiving love from your parent and your caregiver. So that is literally an evolutionary urge. But I think, it's not to say now you have to cut people off and you don't talk to them. It's to say, you just can't go back into the old pattern. I caught myself a little bit spiraling of oh, now I need to make it right with, my parent that, whatever. Or now I saw this ex, and then I was like, maybe I should reach out to them and squash, not that there's beef, but just squash the awkwardness or what. And then it's just that's my old thing now. And there's something underneath it. It's not really about keeping the peace. And also, there's no peace here for me. So that I think is just top of mind for me. I don't even know if it was that relevant to your question, but I wanted to share that.
I was recently listening to a podcast about emotionally immature parents, and I think it's so true. We go back to our parents, especially as adults, right? We're adults, they're adults, and we are always hopeful that things are going to be different than when we were a kid. And they might, and we hold on to hope that our parents will grow. And oftentimes they don't. And we kind of have to just support ourselves in knowing okay, I can't assume anything's going to change. And so I have to know who they are, know who I am, and create boundaries around that. And that's how I heal from this. And it is so true. It just comes back to how we manage ourselves and love ourselves. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah. And I've taken a lot of space, from people who I felt I just didn't have, again, my capacity was so low to do really anything and to engage really with the world around me over the last couple years. I've taken a lot of space, and I'm now feeling the next chapter of healing is, can I actually be in these relationships and not be triggered? And that's the acceptance. That's what was so triggering was, I need you to love me in this way and you're not doing it. And I need you to show up for me and you're not showing up. And so that is the trigger. It's are you going to love me now? Are you going to love me now? I think the real healing now, especially in the relationship with my parents is can I show up here? No, I'm not. Understand that I may not get what I want, or especially what the little girl inside of me wants. And that's okay. And I accept you and I love you still. I love you at what your capacity is for this relationship. And I will show up with whatever my capacity is for this relationship. So I think that's kind of a next step. And, again, they say this is classic Sagittarius. It's when you're out, cut them off, never hear from them again. And I've definitely had that energetic, I would say, with dating, with relationships, and with friendships even, and with some family dynamics. And I think the next chapter will be, can I actually show up here in more acceptance and in more love? Because can I show up to this space and not need the love in this container of this relationship to come from you? Can I actually be the one bringing the love here?
Yeah. Wow. Gosh. And that's like such a challenging thing to do.
Yeah. I don't know yet. Like I said, that's next. So
if someone listening is on this like kind of tipping point or in a similar place to rock bottom, what's one kind of last piece of guidance or advice you would give that person to take the step?
I think when you're in the rock bottom or you're kind of getting there, the thing I would say is you have to trust that whatever is happening is what is meant to be happening. And that's so hard. And I know it's even hard to say that sometimes. And, like I actually in hindsight feel grateful. Like I feel like my rock bottom wasn't even as extreme as, what the things that could happen between illness or deaths of people close to you. Like I didn't really have some of that stuff, but it was intense for me in its own way. But you have to trust that this is all happening for a reason. And it's the most annoying thing to hear. I think that's why I hesitate to say it when you're in it. But, and let me add, let me take that back. I don't want to say trust that it's happening for a reason because, fuck that actually. When you feel like shit, like you don't want to hear that. What I mean to say is trust yourself and trust your body. This is what I meant to say about trust. If you need to lay on the couch the whole day, trust that that's what needs to happen. If you need to leave your job, trust that if you feel like leaving my job is the only way I'm going to get through the next month, but I don't know how I will manage that financially, just trust that there is something that is pulling you to the things that you're being pulled to, even that is pulling you down into this dark pit and into this dark night of the soul. There's a reason that you're needing to go there. And so just like trusting that, I think is really helpful because actually I think a lot of getting yourself out of a rock bottom is part of it is learning to trust yourself. I think especially for women, is learning to say whatever I'm feeling is valid. If I'm pissed off at all these people, I get to be pissed off at all of them. If I feel like shit, I get to feel like shit. If my body is trying to tell me something, I'm going to listen to my body. I think like developing that trust in the rock bottom is really important because what happens in rock bottom is that you're so dysregulated and you're so untethered that you feel like you can't trust yourself anymore. You're like, I got myself here to this shitty place. So you've actually lost all sense of trust in yourself. You feel like you don't even know how to interpret reality, right? It's like I married the guy that I divorced 6 months later. I started the business that doesn't work. I try to have this relationship with my parents and I can't make it work. So like everything I do turns to shit. You have to like fight that story because maybe it all turned to shit because for me, I married that guy for a reason. And that was part of and I started the business, even as shitty as it went for the first few years, for a reason. So you have to trust that even like the stuff that looks negative at the time is for a reason. There's that great parable about the Chinese farmer who, do you guys know this one? No. I don't know. I don't want to do. Okay. So there's this parable about a Chinese farmer and basically it starts off with, I'm going to butcher it, but his son, is riding on a horse and he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And his neighbors are all like, oh, that's so terrible that he broke his leg. And he says, I don't know. We'll see. And then the military comes to town and they're doing a draft and all the able-bodied men have to go to war. And the son can't go. And then his neighbors are like, oh, wow, it's so great that your son was injured and he couldn't go to war. And he said, I don't know. We'll see. And like, I'm messing it up, but it plays out like that. Like all these things happen and everyone around the farmer is saying, oh, it's so great that this happened. So, and he said, I don't know. We'll see. And then you see that like the actual outcome of each event is different. And so, yeah, that is kind of something to keep in mind. Yeah. That you're not going to understand why things are happening, but don't try not to judge what's happening as good or bad, I think is kind of part of that.
I literally got the word trust tattooed on me after I got divorced because I was like, that was for me. Like I wouldn't be who I am today without that relationship. And I just believed that was it. That was part of it.
Absolutely.
Trust.
Yeah. Definitely.
So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I know I resonated a lot. I hope people listening resonated a lot. Where can our community continue to follow along with your journey and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business is Behave Candy. We are Eat Behave on Instagram and TikTok, and our website as well, www.eatbehave.com. And then, so my socials are, I'm just at Mayssa on Instagram and at Mayssa Chehata on TikTok.
Amazing. You guys go follow Mayssa on TikTok. She spills all of the spiritual tea there. And Mayssa, would you be open to sharing a discount code for Behave with our audience?
Sorry, Monica, you were cutting off. Can you repeat that?
Would you be open to sharing a discount code with our audience for Eat Behave?
Yeah, of course. We can make something. We can make a code. We can do like Flow State 10 for 10% off.
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be super fun.
Perfect. Okay.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Thank you so much. We are so grateful.
Yes, thank you.
We will see you all in the next episode.